banknotes from the CBN vaults to commercial banks would at least ease the ongoing naira scarcity in the country. Now, on Friday, the CBN directed all commercial banks to open for operations on the weekends to help meet the demands of customers as part of coordinated efforts to ease the circulation of banknotes of various denominations.
Okay, so thank you, Zibby. So this is a further act in compliance with the Supreme Court order directing that the old banknotes continue to retain their legal validity until the 31st of December this year, alongside the newly redesigned banknotes. Now, the CBN has ordered cash to be released, and we understand that the commercial banks have received some of this cash, if not most of it. However, it's important to point out something. As this cash is being released and it becomes available to the public, it will go to some extent in relieving the burden and the pressure on getting physical cash. However, the total volume of money in circulation has dropped and it will remain that way. So pre-policy, we had over 3 trillion naira in circulation, or 3 trillion naira that had been printed. Now, the CBN's new policies to ensure that that sum doesn't go above, I believe, 2 trillion naira. Now, how the economy responds to that and how Nigerians respond to that will be very interesting. So this week, we expect to see more cash available, and this is also in response to the threats by the NLC and its affiliated unions to picket all the central bank offices across the nation. And it's instructive that we had a court order and we didn't get this immediate traction from the CBN.
Yep.
Then we get a promise of
A promise.
yeah, it's a promise
It's a promise.
that your offices will be picketed. And then all of a sudden we start to see traction. So it then begs the question that do some of our public institutions, do some of our public officials prefer being dragged or almost being dragged to taking the necessary and relevant steps as opposed to just doing the right thing at the right time?
Mr.
So,
said they prefer to be dragged.
so if there was no promise of an impending picketing, would the CBN have moved at this speed with this precision? The answer is debatable. But this is a message to all the public institutions, all the public officials. You do not need to wait for the threat of a strike to do the right thing. And we see it across various sectors. In the oil sector, once New Peng or Pengerson threatens to go on strike, everyone sits up, and whatever it is that had remained unresolved becomes resolvable almost immediately. Go to the aviation sector, it's the same thing. There'll be pending, lingering issues, untreated, unresolved. The public officials appear not to be bothered. The moment the union of aviation workers threatens to go on a strike, immediately everybody's called to a table and issues are resolved. Do we need to get to the brink, to the edge, before we do the right thing?
So Zibby, I'm just going to steal your prerogative for a quick minute here. I know you typically do the comments from listeners, but I have one from someone right, who was having a conversation with over the weekend, and he listens to Freshly Pressed. So he has seen Mr. C, and this is directed at you. He has seen your English was not going to be today because I'm in the mood. So he has seen your progression of thoughts on the issue, right? And he simply had a comment, and actually, I'm not making this up, so you can actually look at it now. So the comment is from my friend Damimola, and he goes, by the way, now that CBN has essentially abandoned its cash confiscation policy, can Mr. C finally admit on air that he was wrong?
Okay, so very quickly, Damilola, there was no cash confiscation policy to start with.
What was it?
No, it wasn't a confiscation policy. It was a redesigned policy, and in the process, the volume of cash in circulation reduced. Now, as to whether I was wrong, now we must remember that several factors were at play here. We did not believe or expect that the banks and the tech sector would fail so badly, because if their services had been up to scratch, then the impact of the reduced amount of cash in circulation would not have been felt. But then you then had reduced cash in circulation, you then had transactions that were not being consummated. debit cards that were not getting across, the payments were not getting across. You had online transfers that were hanging in between banks. Some actually vanished and have still not reappeared. You then had issues of multiple debiting. So you continue to process the same transaction, then later on, say the next day or two, you then get several debit alerts. So it's a whole kaleidoscope of
Mr.
issues.
I remember when you and I actually last time I was actually here in person.
I remember.
Fondly, I hope. Anyhow, so the premise of my argument was that if you looked at the CBN's stated reasons for making this happen, all of those things have not been achieved. Political, economic, social, right? Social in terms of changing behavior driving financial inclusion. This is a walk back and a step back on financial inclusion. Political in terms of curbing the influence of money buying. Well, money buying became strategic, right? And not all over the place
Debatable?
during the elections. No, it was. Don't worry.
In a few states.
Um,
Let's continue.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yes. And then on the economic side, right? Inflation barely down from its pre-cash position, right? Or pre-cash policy position as it well. But if anything, the informal sector has been very, very badly affected, right, by this. There's been a lot of demand destruction. There's been a lot of people who have deferred, right, transactions and business decisions on the back of this. There are people who are asking me questions now about what the value of the naira to the naira is, which is a question that I never thought I would have to answer over the course of my career and all of that stuff. So it's like on every level, right, this has been a monumental failure. I agree with you that the CBN should have moved more quickly as soon as the Supreme Court issued a verdict. I think it took them the whole of that week, right? The whole of the following week after the CBN issued the decision on Friday for them to actually formally acknowledge and respond. And all of the banks were waiting for the CBN's cue, right? The presidency also was waiting for the CBN's cue. So there's something really to be said about the level of recrimination and the level of accountability that we should be demanding from the central bank on this particular issue, because this particular policy has achieved nothing for Nigerians, but it has led to a lot of pain, headache, suffering, and sorrow, right? Or it has left a lot of pain, headache, suffering, and sorrow in its wake. And I don't know how you analyze or spin that out of the way.
Okay. Wow. Messages coming through. Mr. C is not a spokesperson for the CBN. Let's just clarify that. Mr. C is an analyst. No, Mr. C is an analyst doing his job. Because there are a lot of messages asking Mr. C to apologize. Why?
So first
They
of
are
all,
seeing through the things.
no. So first of all, this policy wasn't even so. Literally, we must be very honest with ourselves. This policy actually came from the man on the top. He just passed it through the CBN, and it's in line with his character. He's done it before. He's done it again. Now, beyond that, I agree that this policy did not achieve a lot of the things it was supposed to achieve, and part of the major reason for that is the timing window. They should have afforded a lot more time. Take the example of the UK, and I continue to say this, right? They should have adopted the UK example. Have both set of notes coexist side by side until a predetermined time. However, the body language of the man on top made it clear that they were never going to go beyond that date, and even when it was extended, it was a token gesture. The man at the top had a predetermined plan, and as far as he was concerned, once that plan was executed, whether or not the majority of Nigerians got to like it or got to appreciate it was neither here nor there. Did the policy affect the micro, small, and medium scale businesses? Yes, it did. Some of them have actually closed down. Will they recover? It's a question of time. However, here is where we take stock of what has gone wrong and try to remedy some of these sufferings and losses that have gone through.
Let's go on to some messages. D says, I agree with Mr. C. Aside the Naira-dollar exchange rate is now stable. No one is talking about the dollar anymore. Andy says, reports of kidnappings are said to have reduced. And this one is from Abbas. Abbas says, we thought people said the CBN had burnt all the money. Where are they bringing the money out from? The CBN just made us suffer for nothing. Some businesses will never come up again. Some people supported things like it was the best thing implemented. Emefiele needs to be questioned. And MI says, take a bow, CBN. You have done a lot. Yinka says, I think it's not solely a cash confiscation policy per se. The problem is that the CBN was deliberately ignorant of the fact that the electronic channels are all useless. I don't go about cash on a normal day, so I rely solely on electronic transfers. It was so bad that the USSD channels failed woefully. And this one is from Nedu. Nedu says it's the job of the CBN to carry out a risk analysis and necessary stress test to uncover these humongous failures before going live. It's project management 101. Okay, so let's move on to this one coming from Business Day. Now, renowned human rights and constitutional lawyer Femi Falana has supported calls by the NBA for the Presidential Election Tribunal proceedings to be televised.
Yeah, so Mr. C, I know we're having an argument off air about whether I am your senior colleague or not. I think we came to the consensus that clearly not.
No, we didn't come to a consensus, but please carry on.
Okay, because I want to clarify something from you as my senior colleague. Nominally, court proceedings are in public venue, right?
Yes. So
Yeah.
So the general rule is court proceedings are open to the public,
Yeah.
except on security grounds or where there are minors involved in the case.
Okay.
Now, where there are minors involved in the case, they're usually taken into chambers or the court is cleared.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that's that. But the fact that that's the general rule doesn't necessarily mean that you can just take cameras and come into the court. I think you need I think you need to apply to the judge.
So correct. You either apply to the judge or the judge then decides that because it is his courtroom and he's the master of the courtroom, he will allow television coverage or
Okay, great. Yeah. So there's an element of this that requires the sanction or the discretion of the court to
correct.
Yeah. Right. So I just wanted to go through that so just so we make it clear for listeners why they don't see more television and more court proceedings televised right on television. It's because of all of those rules.
Okay.
So having gotten that out of the way, I completely agree with our definite senior colleague Femi Falana, right? On this, I think that considering how the elections went, the institutional questions that INEC needs to answer with respect to the conduct and the fact that there's an emerging, I don't think that it's full blown yet, but there's an emerging crisis of confidence in how Nigerian democracy is being managed right now. I think it would be a good gesture, and it would make for it will essentially put the strength and the vitality not only of Nigeria's democracy but also of Nigeria's judiciary on display if these proceedings are televised.
So let me quickly jump in with that.
Yeah.
When Ikemesit says it's an emerging process, he's understating the problem. Since 2015,
Oh, for once I'm understating the problem. I actually thought that was a gesture from me to you, because sometimes you make me sound like I am being borderline hyperbolic. So yeah, please, by all means,
so
ramp up.
we've seen that from 2015 to date, there's been a steady decline in voter turnout at elections.
Yeah.
Now that speaks to a number of things. One, voter apathy speaks to a lack of confidence in the electoral process and even the post-electoral process. So it's not just an emerging problem. It's been with us for at least since 2015 or even 2011, I dare say.
Would it have anything to do with the introduction of the beavers, though, sort of weeding out some of these ghost figures that have been reported in the past? Is that a possibility?
So beyond beavers tried to help, but then we saw that certain elements, state and non-state, were determined that it wouldn't be used widely. But beyond all of that, it's even the process post-election that has taken away a lot of the confidence and has led to a trust deficit.
Yeah.
Because some people rightly have come to the conclusion that, look, it makes no difference whether we actually turn out or not. If there are discrepancies, there's voter intimidation, voter suppression, outright cancellation, outright falsification of results, nothing really comes out of the electoral
But we can
process.
also say some of these things have existed pre-2015.
Yeah, no. Yeah, sure. But here's the thing, and that's why this particular period is different, and this is why it makes sense for us to have the proceedings right put on display. INEC spent, and I never tire of saying this, I've said this a couple of times with Smooth FM, I'm not sure I've done it on Freshly Pressed. INEC for the 3 years preceding this particular election went to great pains to reassure Nigerians consistently that with beavers, with technology, with increased training, with the fact that they've expanded, right, the number of polling units in order to reduce the net density of polling units, with all of these institutional frameworks, with the passage of, right, an updated electoral act, with the fact that its allocation has been increased 4 times, right, by the National Assembly, this was going to be the best managed elections we have had. That was INEC's messaging. And INEC had surrogates, including us, right? Because we took INEC at face value heading into the elections, right? You had record registrations. Nigeria's electorate has never been this big, right? But in the end, you had a process that ensured that because lots of Nigerians were operationally disenfranchised, less people voted in this election than voted in the election that got Shagari into office in 1983. So you've got to ask yourself, how did we get to that point? And what are the things that needs to be sorted out? And the election petition, the presidential election tribunal represents a very, very good opportunity for Nigerians to see clearly, because we saw all of the issues clearly, right, as the returns were coming in, as we monitored on IREV, as we saw all of the issues that happened with beavers. So let's see clearly and in real time how the judiciary makes sense of all that's happened. I think it's very necessary. If not, we probably are putting ourselves in a situation where we were in 2007, where the election was so badly damaged that it turned off an entire generation of Nigerian voters. That could happen conceivably, right? I mean, that could conceivably be the legacy of the 2023 election.
So, Ikemesit, are you saying that, in your opinion, INEC didn't do a good job?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, let's take a break and we'll continue the conversation on the other side. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1.
Smooth 98.1.
I know, right?
I like that. So I'm going to enter from there. The next
Oh, yes, really. We're not afraid of them. We will say what we want to say. We will say what we want to say.
Oh, wow.
the next one.
Feel like a buzz.
Oh, yeah. 3 billion for the election petition. That would be fun, actually. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that. Yeah. I mean, I remember that performed during the presidential election and he suddenly...
No, he didn't perform.
No, I'm sorry. He did not perform during the presidential election and he suddenly performed very well during the governorship elections. Why? Like we say on social media, these are the issues.
You send polling units officers or visa specialists, you don't give them access points. So how are you defending that?
They don't have internet access. People are having to hotspots for them.
You came late.
They showed up late.
Some they will show up. You move
Some-
polling
Okay, we're
units
going back
from-
on.
you move polling units from SA to expressways.
You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Mr. C and Ikemesit are the analysts this morning. I see your messages coming through. Please keep them coming. 0809 444 0981. Still on electoral matters. This is from Punch. Now, INEC has budgeted over 3 billion naira to defend the results of the February 25th presidential and National Assembly elections, as well as the March 18th governorship and state assembly polls. So far, though, over 100 election petitions have been filed by aggrieved candidates and parties all across the country.
Okay, so Zibby, this is very interesting, right? At a time we don't have money, the country really doesn't have money. INEC is budgeting 3 billion to defend whatever it believes it did on the 25th of February and the 18th.
Those were
of
elections,
March.
Mr. C. You know what they were.
We've seen elections. We've all been privileged to see elections, not just in Nigeria, but in other countries in the world. June 12th was free and fair. There were no issues with the June 12th elections. Now, when we take some of the issues that cropped up, INEC officials that turned up late to polling units, how do they intend to defend that at the tribunal? IREF not working on the day of the presidential election, how do they want to defend that? Issues of voter intimidation, voter suppression, polling unit officers not having access details to transmit the results to IREV at the conclusion of voting. How do they plan to do that? Moving polling units from secure areas to expressways where they could be attacked by strange individuals. So it really is a mystery. And given the fact that they spent the last 36 months assuring Nigerians that, look, we've got this under lock, we are going to have the best election ever, we've sorted out the technology end of the business, our officers, our officials have been trained, they know what to do. It is fair to say that whatever INEC did this year in the name of elections fell way below the standards expected, fell way below the promises they made. And it is no mystery that the foreign observers from the UK, from the US to the European Union are all singing from the same hymn sheet, which is these elections fell short of the expectations of the majority of Nigerians. So it is a real mystery what INEC intends to defend at the election tribunals.
All right, Fabian says the CBN's lack of accountability is similar to the stance of INEC and some of our leaders. They never take responsibility for their actions. We need to put things in place to make them accountable. JP says we assume the CBN didn't know this Naira redesign policy would fail. 3 trillion Naira in circulation and you move it to about 400 million. Who does that? The governor should be relieved of his duties. And let's go on to this one from Babajide. Babajide says, I stand to be corrected. None of Emefiele's policies has achieved the effect till date. And I have it on record when Mr. C said, I stand by this policy. Also, you don't need to apologize, Mr. C.
My mission here is accomplished.
Realize you are a lawyer. Okay, let's move on to this story coming from Daily Trust. Now, the Lagos State Ministry of Justice has announced plans to prosecute the driver of the bus that collided with a moving train in Lagos. He's been named as Oluwaseun Osibajo. The state government will arraign the driver on a 16-count charge of manslaughter and causing grievous bodily harm.
Yes, so basically he'll be arraigned on 6 counts of manslaughter and 10 counts of grievous bodily harm. The state government said that it will wait until he's in much better health before it makes the arrangement, because he himself also sustained serious injury. So right now he's taking medical treatment. So this is just basically a legal notice, right? As it were, nothing much to see here, right? We'll have a lot more to say about this when the proceedings do commence and we actually have a very clear sense of what the count sheet looks like.
Okay, next story is from Punch. Now, the UK says its mission is working on the list of those who will be slammed with a visa ban. It says the mission has between 5 and 10 names on that list already, and they state that more names would be added to that list.
Okay, so very quickly, we've seen very disturbing and worrying statements come from otherwise reputable members of society, and these statements can reasonably or fairly be interpreted to be divisive and capable of stoking up already simmering tensions between various parts of the country. Now, the UK, through its Deputy High Commissioner, has confirmed that a list is actually being drawn up, and that they've taken note, they've identified and continue to identify the persons behind such statements, the persons behind pre-election, election, and post-election violence and rhetoric that is capable of leading to a breakdown of law and order in society. And it's a commendable step. It's a first step. And I want to believe the US and the EU are equally doing the same thing. Now, it's instructive.
Yes, they are. I can confirm that. Yeah.
So it's also instructive to note the response of a former minister who is believed to be one of the people being looked at. And he went on the tangent of our former colonial masters should leave us alone and stop interfering in our business. Excuse me, sir. This is the 21st century. There is a minimum standard of behavior expected around the world.
So I'm curious about this. How are these lists collated? Is it based on allegations of people on social media? Is it based on credible reports that are handed over from the Nigerian government to these embassies or their envoys? Or are these people carrying out their own independent investigations?
They are carrying out their own independent investigations. I can say this as someone who has taken part in some of inquiries of a similar nature, right? Yeah, for some of these international, for some of these countries, right, as it were, right, and it's usually a mix of crowdsourced, open source information, whether it's media reporting, right, or social media, yeah. But there's a fair amount of fact checking. There's a fair amount of face-to-face interviews, right, that goes into this. The main thing that, in in this case, the UK will need, right, to prove in order to make a justification to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office that um, any Nigerian is deserving of the visa ban as well as sanctions under their human rights sanctions regime is to show clear causality. So a comment you made or an action you made or a directive that you gave directly led to people, carrying out acts of violence, disrupting the electoral process, or otherwise just taking part in voter suppression activities. And so that's the standards that they'll be looking to meet. They've clearly said that 5 to 6 people have already met that standard, and they'll be looking at adding more. And I should say this: the Nigerian elite love their foreign travel. So this is a huge, huge disincentive. This is a tactic that the US and the UK has used hitherto with countries like Russia, with countries like Iran, and countries like North Korea, at least with Russia prior to the election. So basically, sanction everybody around the main person who clearly enabled, right, this kind of activities and this kind of behavior, right?
And it's not limited to visa bans. Assets could also be frozen.
Yeah.
All right, Abbas says we cannot have our court proceedings televised. It will give room for further attack on our judicial officers. Right now, they're being called names, and their pictures and that of their families are everywhere on social media. We cannot say there were no elections because of the flaws. That some preferred candidates did not win the election is not enough reason to condemn the entire process. And Deji says battleground states are the only ones aggrieved by their losses that they now blame on INEC. Elections were conducted peacefully and with a higher sense of patriotism and commitment to purpose by INEC. Let's be guided. And okay, well, that is all the time that we have. Unfortunately, we can't take all your messages, but thank you for listening. Thank you for sending them in, and special thanks as well to our analysts, Mr. C and Ikemesit, for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Do stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.
First Bank.
In hindsight, I wish we did the Boko Haram